Some viewers may find the following video disturbing. Viewer discretion is advised.
All right, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to the Lone Wolf Podcast. I have another new guest on the program today. I first met this guy over on my buddy Franco's show, Frank Analysis. This is Tom Coffey from Coffee and Nuance. You're normally used to seeing me drink something of the alcoholic kind on the show, but since I have Tom Coffey, I figured if there was ever a time to break out a coffee mug today, today is the time, today is the place, and this is the video. Tom, how you doing over there, buddy?
I'm doing awesome. Cheers. I got a coffee mug as well, and we'll
cheers.
pretend there's coffee in it. And
Absolutely.
yeah, it's good to be here.
For those who are not aware, obviously you watch the show, you know, I'm from South Carolina. Tom is way out there on the other side of the country over in the Portland area, which ironically enough, you know, we talk about how hot it gets in the South, but Tom, a couple of weeks ago, you were in a pretty hot place, buddy. I didn't envy you one bit.
I couldn't believe it. For, half a day, I was at the hottest spot in the world. Insane. I think what do you get to? 116, 118, something like that.
Some ungodly triple digit number. But
I tell you, I was upset at my dog just to take her out to go to the bathroom.
Oh, Lord.
That's how hot it was. And it's no wonder that certain regions seem to get a little bit more productivity.
Yeah.
It's no wonder that the desert, where it's 100 and something degrees, that, there's not a whole lot coming out of there, because, man, I didn't want to do any work.
No, you just want to stay inside and enjoy the air conditioning.
Amen.
So for those if you don't know who Tom is, you don't know about Coffee and Nuance, there's going to be a link in the description box below. Definitely go check out his channel. I've actually took a liking. I really watch these videos. Tom, he does different segments, but here lately he does a lot of this stuff on Friday, Fact Check Friday. And he's got a good rhythm to this thing, because a lot of times you get into shows just like this one. We tend to go sometimes, even in videos by myself, I might get, I might get going on a subject. I could run 20, 30 minutes by myself sometimes, but Tom's got it down. It's a good 10, 15-minute video sometimes, and they're very informative, where he fact checks the oh-so-genius fact checkers of the world. He does a really good job with that, by the way. So definitely go check him out if you haven't already. So that being said there, Tom, I got to tell you a personal story about that, and then I'm going to get a little bit on you, let you tell us what you got going on and what got you started into this world of political talk, political figures, and politics. But I was watching your video yesterday, and my wife begged me not to do this. I'm like, I've got to do this. This is pure gold right here. Okay. So sorry, hun, if you watch the video, but I have it on, and you got into your segment and you introduced it Fact Check Friday. And my wife, halfway listening, just stops what she's doing, just turns to me like, what in the hell are you listening to? And I told her, I'm like, guy I'm going to have on tomorrow, Tom, he's got a good show. I watch he's on every Friday. He's like, why the hell does he have something called Fat Chick Friday? What? I'm looking at it, I'm like, are you heard what? So all day long, I've been sitting here thinking about it. I'm like, good Lord, that has just ruined these segments now. Tom has Fat Chick Fridays. So
hey, to each their own, right?
But yeah,
it's funny. Now I'll think about it in a different way. I need to enunciate a little bit more. Fact check.
That's it. So
Friday.
But yeah, the segments, for clarification, they are Fact Check Fridays. They're really good stuff. So Tom, tell us about that. Tell us what you've got going on. What got you started? What made you want to do this YouTube stuff and talk about these issues?
Well, it's funny. I've wanted to make a YouTube channel. I wanted to make it for years. Didn't know exactly what it would be. And I'm still not exactly sure this is not my final form, Right. But I figured I could just talk about something I found interesting that day, something I found interesting in the news, whatever. And if I think it's interesting, there's probably some people that also find it interesting.
Right.
I didn't necessarily get into fact checking until after I was making videos for a while. I had assumed that fact checkers were all legitimate and they were doing an honest job. And in the process of making videos, I would do some research and I would find out, boy, they got this one totally wrong. And then there'd be another topic and oh, but they got this one totally wrong. You know, the one that really got me into it, that I got my first big hit, was on the Obama portrait. And the artist is someone that I know. I've seen his work before. His work's in the Portland Art Museum. I actually went to one of his exhibits in Seattle. So this is someone I was familiar with. And what he did, what he does in a lot of his portraits is he puts little sperm hidden in his pictures. That's part of his thing. He's the artist, Kalindi Wild. He would often have portraits. He would take traditional portraits. He would have like young urban black guys in a very effeminate way in the portraits. He was just kind of creating a different style. And it's very unique and colorful. But part of his thing is he's a real like pro-gay thing. And he brings that into his art a lot. And when Obama's portrait came out, people were commenting that there was, you know, all the fact checkers were saying, "Oh no, there's not little sperm in the portrait. That's insane. That's fake news." And I thought to myself, "Wait a sec. I know this guy. He does this in all of his work. You know, he has these little Easter eggs." And I went back and got the audio tour of when I saw him in Seattle. It was still online. I downloaded the audio tour where they explained that that's exactly what he does. That's kind of his shtick. And I put out a video. It did really well. And then what I noticed is none of the fact checkers bothered to update the story.
No.
None of them decided, oh, hey, we were wrong about this. Maybe we should change it. They didn't care. And then so it would be another story. I'd look at the fact checkers and I would notice they would get that one wrong and they didn't care.
No.
And then it was one after another, after another, after another. And then after a while, you realize either they don't care about getting the facts right, or there's something else going on.
Yeah.
You know, and I lean toward the latter, but I like to go with evidence. I can't read people's minds, so I can't read their mind and know that they have an agenda, but that's what it appears to me. Appears to be for me. And over the past couple of years, I've kind of had a little political journey myself as to what I was into, who I saw. One of the big things that I noticed was how the media was treating Tulsi Gabbard when she was running. I was a fan of hers.
Yeah.
And I would see all these state media or mainstream media just talk all kinds of lies about her. And that really was an awakening to me. I mean, I had known in the past things that happened to Bernie in the past and various things in the past, but I'd never really paid that much attention to it. But I was kind of getting into Tulsi, and then to see all the mainstream lie about her like that, it was really eye-opening for me to really experience that. And I wouldn't have been able to do that if I weren't messing around on YouTube making videos.
Right.
So I feel very fortunate for that. It's been a fun way to express myself, and I've been able to chat with people from all over the world, and that's been awesome. It's been pretty rewarding as a little side thing to do.
Yeah. So you know, I've been watching you here for a little bit, but I went back and I watched some of your other stuff, you know, before you really got into the fact checking. And I really like what you do over there, because, and this is my personal thing. And, you know, I feel like when you do nothing but watch what's going on in politics and you just watch that all the time, it can become very depressing, honestly. Like you talked about, I was a Tulsi Gabbard supporter. I saw what mainstream media was doing to her. And when you just constantly, soak yourself in that, there needs to be an element in the room that talks about something a little more positive. And that's something that I really liked. Like, I remember you had Wednesday segments, Big Idea Wednesdays. And you don't hear many people talk about things like that, especially in our world over here. So I really appreciate what you've been doing with stuff like that, just because, YouTube and the algorithms, they do what they do. But I think we definitely need more voices in the room. And I think everyone who cares about politics, what I would say to a lot of people, and I've had to do this for myself some too, is find some other things to go out and do besides just involve yourself into what are the Democrats and Republicans and the war machine in Silicon Valley and the rich billionaires doing today. Because it, as Trump so eloquently put it, they're the swamp. And if all you do is go study the swamp, eventually the stink is going to start to rub off on you because you're just around it too much. And all that negativity is just going to affect your mental health. It's going to take you down. It's going to make you a very depressed individual. So I think you do really good stuff over there.
Well, thanks. That's one thing I wanted to just a quick comment. So my regular job is I teach fitness classes. That's what I do. That's what I did earlier today. And for me, that's been a great thing. And really, physical health has such an important part on your mental health.
Yeah.
I really believe that any day you exercise, any day you go out, I do dance fitness where I put on songs and dance to it. And everybody dances along, kind of like a big Simon Says type of thing. And it's just a better day of life.
Yeah.
And if you're really into politics and you want to make change in politics, you got to take care of yourself first.
Yeah. So
that then you're able to get people to go along with you. You want to convince people that your way is the right way, or that your opinion's the right opinion. But no one wants to follow the opinion of some shut-in that doesn't have friends. You know what I mean? Like, we want to follow popular people. We want to follow fun, engaging people. We want to follow people that seem like they got their life together.
Right.
So if you're into politics, also, be into yourself, be into your own health, because you're going to be a lot more convincing in your arguments if they can see, oh, that's a cool guy. I like the way he's living his life. I want to be more like that. He goes out and he exercises and he's got a big group of friends. I want to be like that. So maybe I'll check out his politics.
Right.
If you're just shut in with your politics, you may be really smart. You may be smarter than everybody else, but it's going to be hard to convince people, because they're just going to see you as a nerd or something.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you 100% on that. I actually just did a video. Good buddy David Spurrier, he's already got it up on his channel, but we were kind of talking about something similar, and I chalk it up to optics really means a lot. And some people call it a perception is reality. And, I'm interact a lot with a lot of libertarian folks, and this is nothing against what they've got going on. If you actually listen to this guy, Vermin Supreme, and you actually listen to him talk, he's a fairly intelligent individual. But it's like me and Dave were talking about, he has his purpose, and I think he does a good job for what he does. But he obviously has his character. And, we were talking about, like, let's say a libertarian person got on a debate stage, right? Imagine if you're trying to run serious third-party contender here, and you've got the one guy on stage that everyone calls the orange clown. You've got the other guy on stage that everyone said is the clown that has dementia. And then the guy standing right in the middle had a boot on his head. Like, a lot of people would then look at that and say, so this is supposed to be my alternative? It doesn't really, like if the optics are bad enough, they're not really going to listen to a lot of what you're saying, because they're just like, I was looking for something I could put some hope in. I don't know about putting a guy in charge that's got a boot on his head. So it's like you point out there, perception is reality. And if you're not doing better for yourself and you're not trying to put the time into yourself, that's going to show to other people when you interact with them. So you've got to try to take the time to take care of yourself. So I agree with that 100%. So that being said, we got a story here. We're going to look at a couple of articles. Me and you were already looking at one from the Miami Herald, I believe it was. So the big talk in the news lately, you've got different factions, right versus left. Some people don't like to use the terms, but I think that's about the best way to explain this. That are talking about this issue with Cuba. And, I think the one thing that most people can kind of come to an agreement on is that there's really no reason for the United States to keep this embargo and these sanctions on Cuba. There are other countries in the world who operate under so-called communism and socialism, and we don't try to, choke them out Python style the way we're doing to Cuba. So go ahead and get the elephant in the room out here. Me and you were kind of talking about this. I'm going to get your take on this first before we go on straight to the article. But we were talking about before we got the recording, like why do the U.S. keep this on Cuba? Why do they keep this in place? So, but believe it or not, most countries are looking at this and they're saying that it's probably time that it should be lifted. And if I want to give President Obama credit for one thing he did lift these sanctions and tried to normalize the trade relations. I give him complete credit on that. Of course, Trump, one of the more worst things I would say Trump did was when he put them back in place. But that being said, from what I've looked at from history, I would say this goes back to just a grudge from our corporations back to the 50s, because the U.S. had a big hand in Cuba prior to Fidel Castro. If you look at it, Batista was very favorable, with Batista, obviously the previous leader before Castro, very favorable to the U.S. corporations, but not just the corporations. If you go back and you look at a lot of the big corporations of that time period, they had a big hand and ties to dirty money with the mafia. And you talk to a lot of people who know about the Cuban history, Cuba was more or less being pitched as like this island paradise. It was like Las Vegas on an island, basically. You had shows, I think probably like gambling, casino, showgirl type stuff. Come down and enjoy Havana, basically, right? It was a tourist attraction. And the problem is the people who were running the show more or less and in charge of it were organized crime, who were then hogging all of this money for themselves. The money that should have been going into the quote unquote Cuban economy instead was winding up in the hands of organized crime, depriving it from the Cuban people, which is how Castro motivated his movement and got the revolution started. Like, let's take our country back for ourselves. Obviously, he was successful in doing that. And when he did, he believed we're in a communist philosophy. He looked at the resources of their own land and said, if we take these resources and nationalize it and don't let corporations come in and get their hands on it, look at the wealth we could develop for ourselves right here. That was his message. But of course, he ran the U.S. corporations out. He ran the organized crime out, which wanted to launder money through the corporation. He ran everyone out. And because these are the same people who like to try to, make donations to politicians, surprising enough, in only about a year or so, we slap embargoes on Cuba. We start the Cold War with Cuba. We cut off trade relations. We try to choke them out, basically because our special interest had their, that they had their number called. They were kicked out. And so it was a grudge type thing. And Cuba isn't a extremely powerful nation. They don't have a lot of, power going behind them. They're not the size of someone like China, for example, right? So it was low-hanging fruit, and it was a device used to try to crush the Cubans back into conforming into our system. In other words, if we can make things so hard on you that this system is guaranteed to fail, then the Cuban people will get upset and want to go back to the old way. So I'm thinking that just looking at that element from history, I don't really see where much else has changed. So to me, the only thing that really makes sense is, you know, they still want to get their hands in Cuba, as you pointed out. Beautiful land, beautiful beaches. And so, you know, the people who have some money would just love for them to open the doors to these, you know, contractors and developers to come in and really make this place just something special for the tourists. What do you say to that? That's my opinion.
And why wouldn't they? I mean, this is it looks like such an opportunity, and you can expect all the big businesses to want to get in on that. I mean, this is a fantastic opportunity if only there were a different government in place that they could do that were open to that kind of thing.
Right.
It's really interesting. I got to tell you, living on the West Coast, I've never lived on the East Coast. Cuba is so foreign to me. I don't think that I've had the exposure being around people from there or having there's no Cuban community of Portland, perhaps there is. I've never heard of such a thing. So for me, it's like a million miles away. And one of the hard things is, I don't know who to believe about this topic. Things come up about this topic, and I know, there's a lot of ex-Cubans living in Florida, and they have their opinion about things. We have the far left in this country that has a different opinion on what's going on there. We have the corporate media that has an opinion, or they're told an opinion to say, whatever the State Department tells them, that'll be their opinion. But I don't know. I really don't even know who to listen to. And that's what makes this topic so interesting. I got to tell you, I'm okay with not being sure. I'm okay with not knowing what my opinion should be. I'm okay with that. Like, as of today, I don't know. And I'm okay with that. And I hope that the audience can also feel that way, maybe not necessarily about Cuba, but if there's a topic and you don't know exactly who to listen to, it's okay to be skeptical of everyone.
Right.
That's a good thing. Yeah, I really don't know what's going on there. And I mean, I would say that I don't think the sanctions are necessary anymore.
Right.
So I would be against that. But outside of that, I'm up to having my opinion changed or established.
Absolutely.
I just need some more some more expertise, if you will.
Yeah, and I'm with you, because I've got questions, and the little bit that I've already talked about this issue, whether it be on my live stream the other day or the video I just did with David Spurrier, Radical Independent. I'm no expert, and I take the Jimmy Dore approach. He's the jagoff comedian. I'm just a blue collar guy here in South Carolina,
Yeah.
But I try to use the common sense that I have when I look over the details. And the thing that, like you point out, who do you listen to? Because we know that our State Department has obviously got their own goals in mind. They've shown that over the years. And so whenever they say something now, I look at it and take it with a grain of salt. I got to do some more digging on this issue, because, these are the same guys that have talked us into war after war after war, only to really get squat out of it. The weapons of mass destruction that were supposed to be in Iraq, still waiting to see those things. You know what I mean? So you got to be skeptical. But then again, you look at it at the same time, and people say what they want about Cuba. But there are people who try to leave and come to the United States there are the things that have come out, and you talk to actual people who've left from Cuba, and they will tell you, that they have really strict rules. You live certain way. They expect certain things. It being as how they adhere to communism, a lot of their principles based on the type, like you live by the community. You should live with the goal of the community in mind, not just yourself type thing. And so that they will tell you things like, a lot of what you hear us say today, like, oh, it's poison to a society. Some of the things people watch on TV, it's just a negative influence. It influences people the wrong way. A lot of countries who live like we need to do what's right for the community obviously have restrictions on things like that. They say, no, it shouldn't be viewed. It's trash. It's filth. It does nothing for the human mind. It only corrupts. It's Hollywood propaganda, whatever. Okay. You see that really practiced in a lot of places. So when you look at a country who would do things like that already, they've got that much control over what's being viewed and what's being said type of thing. Then you got to really question, like, okay, so the information coming out of this country, they have such control over it. Do you really trust what they're saying? So there again, I'm just like you. I've got a lot of questions. And the question is, who can really answer those questions, and who do you trust when they answer those questions? So I'm completely with you on that. So that being said, let's jump into what some of the questions surrounding this entire thing are. So you've got the recent thing. They're showing all the protests which are taking place in Cuba, and a lot of mainstream media. Some people say that it's about COVID. Some people say that it's, the Cubans are finally tired of living under an oppressive regime. They want to change. They want freedom. Ironically enough, the way they're kind of making this sound, I don't know about you, it sounds a lot like Iraq to me. Like, oh, the Iraqis are tired of Saddam Hussein. We've got to go in with Operation Iraqi Freedom and liberate this place. Which, I don't know about you, but it seems to me our track record of dropping bombs to liberate people doesn't have the best track record in the world. The aftermath of Iraq doesn't look very good. The aftermath of us getting rid of Gaddafi in Libya, that definitely didn't look good when they wound up with a slave trade taking place. So I'm looking at that and I'm going, okay, all the people that say this is going on in Cuba, we've got to liberate Cuba. And then you get some of the right-wing people who say we've got to go in, perhaps even with the military. So question number one, is this really a human rights? Is this a moral issue? If so, why is the United States, who loves a good war, the only one who seems to recognize this problem and wants to take military action? Why is this not being brought up at the UN? Why was it not brought up at, the G7 that they just held? Like, no, it's only the United States who's coming out of one war, almost as if they're looking for, okay, what can take the place of Afghanistan? We're not getting our hands on minerals from Afghanistan if we pull out of there. What could we use as a good replacement for that? I know, a good tourist attraction. Seems suspicious to me, but what do you think?
Oh, it seems pretty suspicious as well. I mean, I think we can, throw a lot of things in. Why is the U.S. not so excited about liberating Haiti? Right? They want to liberate Haiti because, boy, it just looks terrible there. But look, you look at Cuba. Oh, that looks fantastic. They need our freedom.
Oh yeah,
those beaches need our freedom. They need some nice skyscraper hotels and resorts to free those people. That's kind of what it looks like to me. If this really were a humanitarian thing, you would think, I don't know, Mexico might have something to say about it. Maybe Canada might have something to say about it. Perhaps Venezuela or Colombia might have some input. But when it's just people in South Beach, and politicians tied to South Florida that seem to be the one that's not exactly what's going on. Now, if there is a humanitarian crisis, I would support anything to help the people that need it. Clearly, I don't know that that's what's going on here. And I don't, let's just say I'm a bit skeptical of people that are pushing for the U.S. to get involved with some aid to Cuba.
Yeah.
Because aid is a code word for for the people there just losing everything. That what it seems to be. That seems to be the pattern that we see. But outside of that, I don't know enough about what's happening specifically in Cuba to really give an informed opinion. But I can be skeptical, and I can say that it looks a little suspicious.
For sure. And I'll add two things to that real quick before we kind of get on to the next real dicey issue here. But you talk about they need aid. I'm originally I saw a tweet today, and it all makes sense for me now. But originally, I would have thought when someone needed aid, they would need, I don't know, food, water, medical supplies, which will be one of the things we're talking about here in a little bit. But I wouldn't have thought that a Tomahawk missile would have been what they needed. Just something tells me like, no, how does that help them with aid? Well, but then you think about it, Tom, if they're a starving nation and you just blow some places up, it's less mouths to feed though, right? I guess it's aid all the way around. You now the little food you've got can go a lot farther because there's less people to feed with it. So that's a very screwed up way. It was obviously a very sarcastic tweet that put that out, but it puts the whole thing into perspective. For example, the Republicans say we've got to cut the budget. We got to cut the budget. We got to rein things in. So I look at that and I say, well, guys, perhaps they're trying to live up to their word, because Afghanistan, they say it was costing trillions and trillions of dollars. Perhaps a little small war down in Cuba won't cost as much, and it'll still give something for the military industrial complex to sell all their goodies to the government with. So it won't be as costly, but it'll still keep the war machine appeased a little bit, I guess. So give them a little bit of credit there. But that being said, moving on to another one of those issues. So, as you pointed out, why do we not go into a place like Haiti? And I could even throw a few more out there. This isn't obviously a communist place, but look at the treatment of like women in Saudi Arabia. And this is all, of course, just being done under the name of religion and stuff, right? So, you've got women have to keep a face covered, have to wear certain clothing. I think they might finally be able to drive cars now. But, like we're the United States. We've been telling the rest of the world, like, oh, you've got to have civil rights and you've got to have this and that. And of course, you could question how good of a job are we doing that here at home with some of the things you see. But we're telling everyone else how they should act. And then we've got something going on in Cuba, and we're saying, oh, we've got to go save these oppressed people. And yet Saudi Arabia, who ironically enough does business with the United States, it's definitely be a profitable relationship, especially for some people at the top. There's a lot of money involved. You've got the petrodollar involved in this whole thing. And that is an ally. Matter of fact, we will sell guns to them and guard their oil field. So stark contrast there, how we treat the two things. And so that definitely, as you say, is suspicious. It makes me question what's the real intent. And it makes me hard pressed to believe this moral argument of we're doing this because it's the right thing to do for the good of the people, when we're perfectly fine with letting other people live in more oppressed standards, just as long as there's some money already involved in it for the people in charge. So that really brings that into question for me. I don't believe that. And so if someone's got evidence they can present, by all means, send it my way, or possibly even send it Tom's way as well. I'm sure he'd love to take a look. So, but then that's what the right has to say about all this. Now, I'm independent. This is the Lone Wolf podcast. I like to take a look at both sides of the aisle. And when you listen to what the left has to say about this, it's an entirely different thing. Now, they will tell you, on one hand, that the people are having a hard time. They say it is because of the embargo, it's because of sanctions, and COVID hasn't helped the situation at all. So far, so good. This sounds reasonable to me. You know, the United States, one of the biggest superpower in the world, is telling you that we won't trade with you. That could really mess things up for you, especially if you're a pretty small economy in a small nation, right? So far, nothing sounds out of the ordinary. But then I start to hear them talk about how well they've done with their literacy rates, how they've got a 99% literacy rate. It was far below that before the Cuban Revolution. And I'm not saying that that's not or not true. But then they tell you all the great things they've done. For example, they can't import cars because of the embargo. So they've got 1950s, 1940s cars. They keep them running. They keep them on the road. They drive them today. They've been able to make these things last. Like, people in the United States obviously just bought new cars, but they would gladly tell you, even in the place where the parts were being made for these cars, how costly it is to try to keep these things running on the road when you can't find the parts anymore, right? So they've been able to make something like that work. So the implication and the idea being, they've gone above and beyond the expectations you would think anyone could do in these circumstances. So now that leads us to believe that they've found the way to still do great things in spite of the hardships that's being caused from this economic sanction and embargo. And then tell you that the reason that they can't get shots in the arms of people, even though they've made a vaccine, even though some people claim it's supposed to be great, some have even made a claim, oh, it's better than what we made here. Do your own research on that. I'm not going to give my opinion on that one way or the other, because vaccine is a touchy topic. Okay. But they say their jab is better. Some people say it's whatever, but they've made their own. And they can't get it in the arms of people because they have a shortage of needles due to this. Now, right there, I'm looking at that and I'm saying, okay, you had me when you said that they were impoverished because of sanctions and an embargo. And then you start telling me how well they've been able to overcome that hurdle, even to the point, like, what does it take to make a needle? And what does it take to keep a car that's over 60 years old running and on the road? Because eventually engines give out, transmissions give out, axles rust, the frame rusts. You've been able to keep these things preserved and in running conditions somehow or another. But you're having trouble making these things right here. I don't know, Tom. Just before we get into the article, listening to that, if you were an objective person, and like you say, you this is a million miles away for you, just listening to that, it almost sounds like one of those scenarios where they're trying to have their cake and eat it too. It's like either they're impoverished and have a lot of problems because of the fact they can't trade, or they're doing really well off, and in which case, how can they not make something so simple themselves? What do you think?
Well, I think everything looks easy from afar,
Right.
When you're judging other people, you think, oh, that's easy to do. And when you try to do it yourself, it might be a lot more work than you imagine. However, one would think that needles are an important part of a society. They've needed needles before this point. Once you figure out how to make needles, they could probably come up with a way to make more needles and make them in bigger quantities. So it's a little hard to buy that narrative.
Right.
Although, it's possible.
Sure.
It's possible. Maybe they had a great needle factory and it just burned down and they haven't been able to replace the equipment, and it just timing wise didn't work out well. I mean, stranger things have happened.
Right. So,
but I think they can make some needles.
Yeah. And to add to that real quick and get your take on this, because I forgot to throw this in the first time, because someone tried to raise a good point to me on this. And I think if you're looking at it at first, it is a good point until you start to add more nuance to the topic. And as they point out, when the pandemic first hit the United States, good Lord, look at the United States. I mean, how big are we? We trade. We don't have embargoes, right? But we had shortages of supplies, and nurses came out and said, yeah, we've got shortages here. Fair point. Until you put into context what something else the left talks about in regards of Cuba is the fact that they have this Medicare for all system, meaning they've already got a system in place where everyone is supposed to have access to health care. Now, if you're going to the doctor on a regular basis, I don't know what kind of vaccines they were distributing prior to this in Cuba, but I know in the United States, part of the normal regimen for babies involves vaccinations, which involves needles. These are the same embargoes that have been in place all this time, and they've already got a system which, if you hear the left, they would tell you is still better than that in the United States, that they're equipped to handle medical stuff for everyone and that need is met. Whereas in the United States, we don't have that. We had it where a lot of people didn't go to see doctors regular all the time. And when you get something where a lot of people are really falling ill all of a sudden in a system that did not anticipate people going to the doctor or going to the hospital as regular, then it would make more sense why the system would all of a sudden be hit with a shockwave, because this is not the normal. And they obviously were not prepared for that many people to have to come in at one time. So if we're following that argument that they've been preparing to be able to treat people for years and years, they go to the doctor, they go to the hospital, they're taking care of that need, then it would make sense that key elements of medical supplies, for them to have done it so successfully all this time, which they claim they have. Even people like Michael Moore will tell you that. If you listen to one of his documentaries, he's like, oh yeah, Cuba's healthcare is way better than ours. So if they've been able to do that so successfully, why am I to believe that very basic medical supplies are just not there? Again, something in that whole thing, it sounds like 2 + 2 = 5 to me. Now, if someone's got the evidence that they could present to make that case, I'm very much open to see it. But something doesn't add up with that.
Yeah, I just looked up needle exchanges here in Portland. So as you know, right, Oregon, everything has been decriminalized. Right. Often there's needles on the street. When I'm walking my dog, I'll see needles in front of my house.
Oh boy, all
over. But it looks like they did needle exchange about 8 million needles last year here in the city of Portland. Obviously Cuba's bigger, but I think it's probably, you said you're in North Carolina?
South Carolina.
Oh, South Carolina. Okay. All right. It looks like the population of Cuba is about that of North Carolina.
Right.
So, it's a bigger population, but I mean, do they not have heroin addicts in Cuba? Right? Because we go through a lot of needles here. I mean, millions of needles.
Right.
Every year for addicts. That's not even people that are getting it from the hospital, from their doctor, or anything like that. This is like 8 million just in home use, if you will.
Right.
So it does seem hard to believe that is the bottleneck for Cuba. That's a hard line to buy. Might be true, but it's difficult to buy that.
Yeah, I agree, and that's me. I don't want to rule in for sure one way or the other, just because I'm not a medical expert. I'm not a Cuban expert. I look at things from, does this situation and what you've presented to me make sense to me? And so far, it just doesn't at this point. Again, if someone's got the evidence, then I'd love to have that. I'd love to have that evidence. But I'm going to have this up. You've already been taking a look at this from the Miami Herald. I'm going to splice this in so the viewers can see it when the video goes up.
Okay.
But reading through the article here, from the Miami Herald, Cuba, which says it has developed 5 COVID vaccine candidates and immunized about 2 million people in the island of 11 million people. So, as you pointed out, they're bringing in about 8 million needles. You've been able to get those into Portland. They're saying the island of about 11 million people. So, not too far off there number wise. It says about 2 million people in the island of 11 million. Apparently, didn't plan for a crucial part of its vaccination campaign, syringes. Okay. As COVID-19 cases have spiked in recent weeks, the lack of syringes looms as a major challenge for the island, where a crushing recession has triggered a food crisis, shortages of medicine, and basic necessities. Trump-era sanctions made it harder for Cuba to buy syringes from major manufacturers, which are already swamped with orders from bigger, richer countries. Making matters worse, some of Cuba's vaccines require 3 doses, meaning the Caribbean nation needs more syringes per capita than most countries, using the double shot made by Pfizer, AstraZeneca, Moderna, and the single dose jab by Janssen. Cuba is aiming to vaccinate all of Havana's 2 million population by September and a total of about 10 million people by the end of the year. When it became clear the island would not manage on its own, aid organizations in the U.S. and Europe sprang into action. They launched campaigns to collect donations to buy syringes and have shipped them to the island to help narrow a deficit of as many as 25 million syringes. The response in just a little over a month has been phenomenal, according to Global Health Partners, a New York-based NGO that's leading the Saving Lives campaign. Others in Spain, Italy, and Latin American nations like Argentina and Honduras have also contributed. Cubans living abroad launched campaigns in cities all over the world, and in Miami, a caravan against the U.S. embargo last month also collected local donations. So, looking at that and looking at when this article was published, here's what strikes me as being odd. This sounds to me like, if indeed there is a problem with needles, help is on the way. It's what that sounds like to me, right? Like you've got a collaboration of players from around the world now saying, okay, we're going to help you out. This article was done in June. So if in fact there's still an issue and it's about having this shortage of needles and things like that, which is what people are saying a lot of that protest was about. This is in July. We're almost midway through July and this just sprang up. This article came out June. Let me go back up and see exactly when in June. June 18th. So literally 1 day short of a whole month ago is when this news came out. And yet it was a week ago that all the protests started. So if help was on the way, what happened to the help? If it got there, then why is this such an issue? And is it really what the protests at that point are indeed about, if they've already gotten the syringes to start administering the vaccines? So again, something else here does not add up to me, but who do you listen to? This is another 2 + 2 = 5 to me. What do you think?
Yeah, it's tough to know about protests unless you're on the ground, or at least if you're talking to people that are on the ground.
Yep.
Or watching a live stream or something like that, where someone's interviewing people and talking to people that are there, because we don't necessarily know what they're thinking and we can't read minds. And, unless I hear it from someone, it's hard to know. Last year we had protests every day here in Portland, over 100 days in a row. And I would always put on the live streams like after midnight. And it was a totally different thing that I would see after midnight than what people would see at 6 p.m. And it was a totally different reason that people were protesting.
Right.
People protest for different reasons. And I think, so yeah, I don't know why it's happening, and I don't necessarily trust. I would believe the people. If I heard the people say this is why I'm protesting, I'll go with that.
Right.
But if it's Fox News is telling me this is why the people are protesting, or MSNBC tells me that this is why the people are protesting, they don't have a great track record for me to just buy what they're selling.
Right. So, and this leads me to one other thing that I just found interesting while I was trying to do some digging about this whole needle issue. So, in my research, I tried to look up how hard is it to make a medical syringe or hypodermic needle, I believe is the more even fancier way of referring to them, or whatever, right? So while I was looking, I just happened to stumble upon a random article that taught people how to make homemade syringes. Okay. And not just homemade. And this came out July 25th, 2012. Right at the top, I'll have it on here for the viewers to see. How to make a syringe in prison. Okay. Says, as the 19th International AIDS Conference in DC spotlights needle exchange programs, the Fix reports from America's prison system, where addicts take matters into their own hands by making and teaching others how to make a syringe. Addicts in prison go to extreme lengths to get their fix, but scoring drugs isn't the only obstacle they face. How to shoot them up. With no works available, a heroin user in jail needs a little ingenuity. The result of this ingenuity is a binky. Even though these can be manufactured, not every user has his own. Shakedowns and lack of materials make them scarce. Prisoners try not to share, but when it comes right down to it, they're likely to overcome their reservations. See, people say, I usually don't share needles. That's a quote, says one prisoner. But if there's only one binky and my homeboy got the Chiva, you know what, I'm taking a hit. Why wouldn't I? This is a prison and I'm trying to get blasted. I'll deal with the rest later, end quote. The rest includes the widespread HIV, hepatitis C. But here's how you make the binky. And then it gets off to it. It says, you start off by taking the point of a needle from a diabetic guy who has a chance to break or pull it off after taking his insulin. Every prison has a pill line located at the medical department where diabetics and others go to get their meds. At different times, each of the nurses will hand a diabetic syringe containing insulin through the window, watching him inject and enduring that he returns the syringe. Your man just has to break the needle off before he gives it back. Once you get the point, you should be about an inch along. You can take a clear Bic pen, take the inside out, cut the outer casing down about 2 inches from the tip, get a paper clip, straighten it out, and insert it into the tip of a Bic pen. Very slowly put a flame to the pen tip, rotating it to melt and tighten up the plastic at the top where the point will go in. So, without reading through this entire thing, because I don't want the video to be an infomercial on how to do prison drugs. But the point is, this is ingenuity from people who are literally in a prison. Now, being from South Carolina, let me tell you something. I know some as what we call around here the good old boys who know how to live off the land, self-sufficient, grow their own food, what they don't hunt and kill in the woods. Okay. They can make their own food. They can make their own liquor. They can make their own wine. They know how to do these sorts of things, and they can make all sorts of things in the home. Ingenuity is a very, very important thing here. And something to add to that, if people who want to live off the grid, literally, they might as well almost be putting themselves into their own trade embargo, right? And yet they're able to make things work. Similar, I guess, to how the Cuban people have been able to keep making these 1950s cars work. And so, again, that just ties back. Like, I get it that these things would not be the most ideal things to use, obviously, when you're trying to administer something of the medicinal value, not just street drugs, but we're trying to administer a proper vaccine. Wouldn't be the ideal thing to use. But if you were really in a pinch and had your back against the wall, I'm just getting to the point. I'm like, how could you tell me they could not figure out a way? You see what I'm saying? Like, so I read all this stuff and I'm like, you got people in prison, even though they're technically breaking off the end of a needle to do it. You're not in a prison. You do have access to trade with some people. And so you would think you could have looked at it, found a way to make your own, especially if you've already got this great medical field that's supposed to be able to handle giving everyone medical care. I would think needles would be an important part of that. I mean, good Lord, what are needles used for? Drawing blood, administering vaccine, insulin if you're diabetic. I mean, go down the list here. I mean, seriously, needles are a very important part of the medical field. And if they're that great in the medical field, how could they make such a massive error in calculation when it comes to this?
Yeah, it's hard to believe.
Right. So
it's just a hard to believe story.
Yeah. And so again, this isn't to tell the people one way or the other that, oh, everything you're hearing that the left has to say is an absolute lie. I think, and you tell me what you think on this. I like to be an informed individual. And when I hear talking points being pushed at me, I have got to the point in my life where I never just take the word for it. There's so many people who are telling what they want people to believe in today's world, especially from the mainstream media or the fact checkers or whatever. And so I look at that and I say, someone makes a claim. I want to see real good evidence that backs that claim up. And when I start to hear conflicting information being lumped into the same story, I take a step back and I start asking questions. So you tell me how you feel, but I'm the type of person, I'm going to ask these questions. I'm going to put it this way, not to try and make people think, oh, it's a complete lie, just to give that pushback, just to give that dissension and say, I now want you to provide me more evidence to make this situation make sense, because I don't want to assume you have bad intentions and you're just putting out BS propaganda on one side or the other. But maybe you just didn't clarify the things you had to say well enough. So provide me with this missing information that made me ask you these questions. Provide me with that so that it makes more sense to me and I can be an informed individual. How do you feel?
Well, one thing, an idea that I came up with, I talked about this recently on my channel, was the idea of a simple alternative explanation.
Right.
And in many things, I don't need to be convinced. I don't need a ton of evidence for me to consider something different. But what I would like is just a simple alternative explanation.
Right.
So if you can come up with that, that's cool. Now, in this case, like perhaps if someone said, oh, well, needles are made of this certain type of steel that's rolled out to a certain depth or
right.
thickness or something like that. And they actually have a place that they make them, but because of the embargo, they haven't been able to get the sheets of steel that work with that. And that's really the hang up, is they just haven't got these particular sheets of steel. I'd be, oh, okay, well, that makes sense. Now I just made that up. I don't even know what syringes are made out of. But
just like me.
Okay. But if there's a simple explanation that can explain it, I'm pretty easy. I'll go with it.
Yeah.
You tell me, oh, well, the reason is because the steel that they're getting through the embargo is too thick to make up the needles and whatever. I'd be okay, that's cool. I just give me something. Just give me something. Just give me a different way of looking at it, and I'll consider it. And at this point, I'm not really seeing that. So I'm skeptical.
Yeah.
But I'm open.
I agree. And so to close up on one last thing with this here, and then if there's anything you want to throw on before we close out here, you're more than welcome to. But I've been hearing one other talking point aside from the medical type stuff. Okay. This kind of goes back to something I referenced earlier. You got the right saying that they want their freedom, that they're tired of living under the oppressive regime. And aside from the medical aspect of what's going on and the sanctions and this and that, you get a lot of people on the left who say that the people who do leave the country, they pretty much give the implication that the main reason that they're leaving are because things could be better, but they just don't have a good understanding of why those things can't get better, and that it's all the fault of the United States and the sanctions and the embargo, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So as I said to my good buddy David Spurrier when I did the video with him, that's why I support getting rid of those things, just because then it's sink or swim time. You can't blame the problem anymore on the United States if we're not imposing that problem. And then let's see what happens. If that theory is correct, wonderful. If it's not, there's clearly another problem at work. But I have an idea, and this is just me. No pun intended here, but I think it's a nuance that doesn't make its way to the conversation. So here's my idea. People have different priorities as far as what matters the most for them. And when you look at the general idea of communism and even some forms of socialism, which if you talk to certain people, they will tell you the end goal of socialism is communism, as Lenin wrote. Okay. Different people have their different views. So I'm not saying that has to be the case, but some people will tell you that. And when you look at the word communism, the root word seems to be community. It's like a team element, as if we're all here to make sure things get done. Well, if you're looking at priorities, the first thing that obviously has to come into place are those basic needs and necessities. So when you listen to what they pitch as being the benefit of such a system. It seems to come from, you don't have to worry about going broke from medical debt. It's not going to happen. We're going to make sure that your health care is provided for. You need an education. You don't have to worry about paying to go to an Ivy League school. We're going to make sure everyone here has a 99% literacy rate. We're going to make sure that people aren't just living out in the homeless while other people are living in mansions. You might not be the fanciest of houses, but you'll have a place to live. Seems to be where the basic premise. And so a lot of people look at that and say, I would rather live in a system where all my basic needs can be met and we don't have such a problem with the homeless, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. And that's perfectly fine. Some people are okay with that. But let's be honest with ourselves. And I want to hear what you think, but this is where I think a lot of this comes from. And I don't think many people want to recognize this. There is very obviously a trade-off there. You pretty much level the playing field where everyone has equal standards. And some are going to look at that and say, well, that's great. But then others would say, what makes me motivated to go farther? Like, I want more freedom, even if it's just a concept that I have freedom. It's almost like in the Matrix, right? Like, I'd rather go back and be brainwashed and believe that all this stuff was really real or whatever than live in the reality that it never was. Like the one guy in the Matrix who wanted to be plugged back into the system, right? He's like, he's eating the steak and he's like, I realize it's fake or whatever, but he's like, ignorance was bliss, right? There's some people who want that element of freedom and the opportunity to possibly go further. And you can call it greed, desire, drive, whatever. But they look at it and they said, I'm not satisfied with just having this. And I feel like I have an opportunity to be so much more than what we have right now. And that element is more important to them than just having the basic needs met because it was the good for the community. That's what I look at. And so I say, for people who try to say, you know, because there's obviously, this is something else that doesn't get covered very much, but there are pro-regime protests taking place right now in Cuba. There's obviously people who do like the current system down there, don't want to change it. And then there's people who do. And I think that you're always going to have that in politics. You've got the right and the left here. You've got certain people who say, I don't like the way the United States is anymore. I'd rather move somewhere else. But then you've got other people in other countries who say they want to still move here to chase the American dream. I think that it's the same concept. And so I think what the right and the left need to possibly look at with a little more nuance is not that in something the size of Cuba, that communism or socialism has to be a complete failure. It is small, and it's easier to control smaller things and make them work right. When you talk about imposing something like that to the size of the United States, where you have so many other states already involved that have their own separate economies and different cost of living, it becomes a much more complex issue. For something the size of Cuba, as you pointed out, it's roughly about what? The size of North Carolina? It's a much more controlled experiment at that point to try and make sure those gears are turning in the way they're supposed to be. So the right needs to look at that and possibly understand that regardless of how we feel about that economic theory, they might be able to make it work a little bit better. You'll have to give them a chance to see, lift these sanctions, lift the embargoes, and let's see what happens. But the left needs to also understand with this idea of it's the best thing to have this community style approach, that there are certain people that's not the most important thing to them. And if you force it down their throat forcefully, because in any place where it's been put in place in the past, this has always been the argument I've been given by a communist, like on the Soviet Union. Well, it was a populist uprising, and then the wrong people just took charge. Well, there's obviously, even if it was a popular uprising, there is always a minority who might not agree with it. What do you do to that minority once you've made the change and they don't want to live by these community standards? What do? Typically, the ideal thing, the approach has been more authoritarian, and it is you don't support the community. You're not a team player. And just like kids at recess, you didn't play nice with the team. We put you in timeout and they put you in jail. You either go to jail, you got stuff like the gulags, et cetera, et cetera. They're like, you're not doing good for the community. You're not participating. We're going to put you away. And in some cases, Castro in the past has given his people the chance, said, fine, instead of putting you in jail and being more burden to us, we'll open the jails up if the United States will take you. And you can leave and go to the United States. That has happened a couple of times in the past. So one thing I want people to look at, and then I'm curious what your take on this is look at it with a little more nuance and just don't play such partisan politics and such tribalism like, oh, I believe this economic theory is better, so it has to be the best thing going, and there's no way that people aren't satisfied with having their basic needs and necessities met. Mankind is still mammals. Mammals like to have a little bit more freedom. Even a house cat sometimes, as fat as he might get in the comfort of that home, as spoiled as he might be, has ventured outside the house to see what's outdoors. They have a curiosity, you know, that and humans are mammals. They have that curiosity like, okay, could there be something even better than this awaiting me outside the walls of Cuba? Think of it in that context. What do you say to that?
Well, I think, I think you think of what we can all agree on, and I think we all want, what's best for the Cuban people.
Right.
We all want them to have a better life. We all want them to have a little more freedom. Absolutely. I would say, I think it'd be nice if they could keep their country without it being taken over by, big worldwide corporate resort companies just coming in and building the thing out, which is what I suspect will probably happen. It can't be stopped, but it would be nice if, they could keep what they have there.
Yeah.
And it's also nice that they have a system. I think it's good for the United States to say, well, look at Cuba, even though they don't have enough syringes, even though they don't have any new cars, at least they give enough care about their people that they're going to let everyone go see a doctor.
Right.
And, maybe that can be contagious here. I wish more people would think that more people here would just be like, yeah, you know what? We're the richest country in the world. If someone's without a job or something, they should maybe be able to go to a doctor. And maybe it's not free, but maybe we can make it a price that someone that's unemployed could afford. Right. Just denying people being able to see a doctor is pathetic. It's really pathetic.
I agree.
And that is at least one thing that Cuba's got going for it. And I hope that can be an example.
Yeah.
That no matter how poor someone is, if they fall down and they get a big cut and they need some stitches, that they're able to go in and get it done.
Yeah, absolutely. And they don't have to do like I did that time and clean it with peroxide and use a little Loctite glue to seal it up. So, yeah. So that being said, before we wrap up here, are there any things that you've noticed going on lately that you want to kind of touch on just real quick before we wrap things up here?
The thing that I want to touch on is in my video yesterday, I asked people, where do you get your news? What is the source of your news? Because I don't like any of it. Everything I look into, and I just pick 2 things off the cover of USA Today, and both of them were BS, or were not backed by any journalistic standards whatsoever. And I really believe that the way that the media, the way that Americans get their news is not good, and it's not leading in good ways. And I wish there were a source that you know, like at least one place there's like, okay, well, they give legit news. You know, they try to be unbiased, and they try to not just push State Department talking points. They explain what's going on. I don't know that that exists. I'm not aware of it. It seems like it's a lane that's wide open. You know? But I wish there were some place to get good news that you could trust. And I just don't. I see a lot of problems in my own personal life, relationships that I have. One of the biggest problems is these people in my life, they believe BS that is just manufactured, that's not even true.
Yeah.
And when I try to explain that it's not true, I don't think they're open to the idea that maybe the news can be wrong, or that what they heard is wrong. You know, it's like, I saw it with my own eyes. And it's like, well, yeah, but you can see things with your own eyes and still be wrong.
Right.
You know? And I think it is really destroying relationships. And I've never seen things so divided as they are now. And I put the blame on the media, on the news. They're the ones driving this. And it's sad. I mean, had I to do it all over again, who knows? Maybe I just never, ever watched the news, never follow politics, and I might have been better off. I'm being serious with that. I can't have a lobotomy and forget everything that I've learned now. And that makes it tough. But that makes it tough to then have relationships with people that don't understand that, you know, which is probably most people.
Yeah, I agree. But I will say this, Tom, I'm glad you finally did watch the news, because as I said at the beginning of the video, I think you're a good voice in the conversation here. And I like a lot of the take, because it's not a lot of what you start to see. And some might even say I'm guilty of this on my own channel as well. A lot of the stuff you see and you hear at other places. Now, I'd like to think I add a different dynamic, just because I don't think that there's very many, people from the rural working class South that you really see in that conversation. So I probably have a different outlook on some things, because you get a lot of people in the conversation who are from places like California or New York or something like that. And so you kind of hear a lot of that same ideas coming through. Whereas I talk to people left, right, libertarian, whatever. And growing up in a very red state, a lot of people write, or the red type voter off, the Republican right-wing voter off. Whereas I kind of understand a little bit more how their mind is working, because I grew up in the environment. And so I understand, no, don't think necessarily because someone has that point of view, they're unreachable, they're too far gone, or they're just a downright racist. There's been things that have taken place potentially that have led them to believe certain things. They feel outcast by a system. And you'd be surprised of how many of these people you can reach. And they've got a lot in common with you if you try and actually talk to them on and get some understanding. So I think I try to add that element. But still, when I get to doing my videos, and I will say I'm guilty of doing this here recently. I hate that it came to this, but apparently the viewers wanted to watch it. So I have made some content in the recent weeks that I really don't think adds any substance to the conversation. But apparently people wanted to watch it. Apparently they wanted to watch it, because when you look at the average view count on one of my videos, I'll be doing good to get into those triple digits. It's either just under 100 or a little over 100. But when I talk about certain things, surprise, surprise, I can go from 3 digits to 4. I'll be in the 1,000 counts at that point. So
that's what I need to do. I need to switch and just start talking about some gossip and some heat and some drama.
Hey, talk about Jimmy Dore and TYT, and you will be raking in some views, guarantee you.
Well, it's funny with all the talk about TYT. I can't believe that anybody watches it. It's been so long since I've seen them. And every time they're suggested, I click on the little thing. I'm not interested in this. I'm not interested in this. I'm not interested in this.
And you still get it anyway.
I still do. They're still pushing it.
Yeah.
But it's so farcical. It's hard for me to put myself in the mindset of someone that would buy what they're selling.
I agree.
It's almost like parody.
Yeah.
And so in many ways, it's like I don't want to. I have done some videos in the past years ago where I did some TYT fact check stuff, but I just got so bored with it because I feel like it's, picking on the mentally challenged or something. Like I just feel bad. Their takes are so dumb.
Well,
but perhaps
so dumb they got $20 million to give them, though. Remember that.
Well, they're doing something right.
Yeah, well,
they're doing something right. But in the meantime,
those Clinton donors, Katzenberg and Buddy Roemer, the old Republican donor, you'd be surprised how dumb you can act when someone's paying you enough to do it, I suppose.
Oh, and I'm ready. I mean, hit me up, anyone. I'll give any dumb take you want if the price is right. I got no problem there.
Yeah, I mean,
the only reason I have integrity is because no one's paying me otherwise. Well,
I wouldn't want to sell out the Lone Wolf podcast here, but I tell you what, if someone approached me and said that we can take care of your job, you don't have to go do that rough job you're doing these days, and we'll just pay you to sit around here and do beer reviews, I think I might take that deal.
I could do that too. You want me to do a cooking channel? Sure.
Just sit around and tell us how crappy Budweiser is, how great a Pabst Blue Ribbon is, and then review some craft beer in between. Yeah, I could do that. And by the way,
okay.
That is no disrespect out there to my good buddy Carlos from the Beer Experience 360. He's brought me on his show in the past, and I'm not disrespecting you there, buddy. I did start a second YouTube channel, but I barely have enough time to do much with this. And it was supposed to be more like reviews of things. And me and my wife did 2 beer review. But I haven't uploaded anything else since then. And one of these days, maybe we can keep going, but it was more just like a blue collar. It literally is called Blue Collar Review.
There you go.
But we'll see what happens with that one of these days. But yeah, definitely if you want to keep your ear to the ground, and if there's any more rumbling that comes up about Kyle Kalinske and Jimmy Dore and Crystal Ball and Cenk Uygur and Anna Kasperi, if you hear something come up, just make a video, give your opinions on it, and you can even get ratioed to death, because I got news for you. When the whole thing first started, I had 3 ladies who disagreed with me, and I brought them on to do like a debate. And to be fair, I didn't mind the conversation. I had my point. I let them make theirs. But there were a lot of the Jimmy Dore people, because they were kind of they didn't like some things that Jimmy Dore had said, and they gave me pushback on it. And I guess there were some really pro Jimmy Dore people who found that video. And because it was 3-on-1 and it was a man who was taught be respectful to women, debating 3 other women. I tried not to interrupt them. So you can kind of figure out who did most of the talking. I made my points when I made them, but they kind of bounced back and forth off of each other a lot. And again, I thought it was a good video. But I guess there were a lot of people who were triggered that there wasn't enough pushback, I guess, in defense of Jimmy Dore. And I got about anywhere from 50-50 to 60-40 ratio on it. It was worse than 50-50, but I don't think it was quite a 60-40. So maybe, 53-47 type thing.
There
right?
you go.
So, but yeah. And by the way, the 53 disliked, the 47% liked, because I started getting all this stuff about bringing these woke women on, spewing their venom about Jimmy Dore, this and that. So I made obviously a follow-up, but look, every time I covered that video, I either, like, I think the lowest one yet, when I talked about that issue, still got like 500.
Wow.
So if you hear anything else coming and you just want to shake things up all of a sudden,
well, I'll consider
it's not a bad topic, but I
it.
will caution you on this, Tom. I will caution you on this. Be careful, because I got a feeling that if there's many people out there like me and they appreciate what you're already really doing, that it might backfire in a sense, because they're going to be like, I hope he's not going to abandon what he's been doing to talk about this stuff.
Yeah.
So, because like I said, man, I can't speak for everyone else, but listening to a lot of the things that you bring up, it's pretty cathartic, actually. It's a really good breath of fresh air to hear some of those things. So,
well, I appreciate that. It means a lot to me. Honestly, it's the feedback that I get from the videos, the comments, that the authentic connection making with the audience, that is really the only reason why I do this, because I don't make enough to. I'm probably still losing money. I just keep buying more stuff for my studio and more.
Well,
expanding the set,
that's me over here. I haven't quite got as fancy of a mic as you. I've just still got a USB one over here. I think you've got one that's got the sound adjustments and all, right?
Yeah, no, I got this is the same one Alex Jones has.
Oh boy.
So I figured, if it's good enough for him.
Yeah, well, I completely understand where you're coming from, because I mean, I didn't sink a lot into what I've got over here, but I put enough to try to give it, a feel other than just a basic wall behind me or whatever. And being as how I'm not even over 1,000 subscribers yet, I have zero possibility to make money from this YouTube channel. So we're growing, and again, talking about the things that were aforementioned here, has gained over 160 subscribers in about 3 weeks.
There you
Whereas
go.
I was at a nice little crawl beforehand. So we're inching closer to the 1,000 subscribers. But
You'll get there.
Yeah. With that being said, give us your final thoughts here. Tell us where we can find you at, what you've got going on, and anything you've got coming up.
So yeah, I'm on all the socials, YouTube / Coffee and Nuance. You put Coffee and Nuance into Google, you'll find everything. But all my stuff gets posted to every platform. I try to interact on the different platforms, although not as much. And I am looking at doing something new. I'm looking at doing some more. Just the past couple months, I've just been doing 1 or 2 videos a week, just because I've been busy with other aspects of my life.
Right.
And I've been trying to figure out some things that I can do with my channel to make it more compelling, that might actually get in the algorithm. It gets something that can be shared, because I'm essentially shadow banned right now. There's people that subscribe to me that never even get my videos recommended to them.
Right.
So that's not good. I can look at the analytics and I can see that the majority of people that watch my videos do so from my page, meaning they go to my page to see if I have a new video. And that's not a typical YouTube experience. I'm trying to come up with something that might reverse that trend. I'm considering it's going to be exciting and it's going to be flashier and for fun. And one of the things that I like, I got this ridiculous set here, and it's like, why do you have this ridiculous set? And it's to amuse me. I think it's funny. Okay. Everybody's got the same thing. All these people that were zooming in last year, they had the bookcase behind them. It's boring, be original. I got a tiki bar. That's what's going on here. I've got too much camera equipment, too much technology, because I find it funny and I get a kick out of it. And a lot of times that's why we do things. We do things because we get a kick out of it. And I think that gives me energy to keep going. But hopefully I'm going to be doing some more videos soon, some new stuff. So I hope you check it out. Come by and say hi. I feel like I have the best audience on the platform. I'll challenge anyone else on that. But I think the people that watch my videos are the absolute best. And it means a lot to me. Thanks for having me on. This was a lot of fun chatting with you today.
Yeah.
I appreciate it. And that's it.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, definitely, if you haven't already, you've heard what Tom said, you've heard what I've said. I'm going to have links in this description box below. Go check him out. Go see what you think. If you like him, give him a subscribe. Make sure you're giving his videos a thumbs up, just like with mine. It helps. It helps get things out there as best as it can. But yeah, I've enjoyed having you on. It's been a good conversation. We've definitely kind of gone back and forth on some topics and challenged narratives here. And it's been great. And, if you're ever interested, love to get together again sometime. Do this again one of these days. So you're always
good,
welcome
brother.
back here, buddy.
I look forward to it.
All right. So that being said, this is the end of the show. Again, remember, make sure you're smashing those like buttons. Drop some comments in the comment box below. Let me know what you think. And then again, make sure you go check out Tom. The links are in the description box below. We will see you next time right here on the Lone Wolf Podcast. Take care, everyone.